Rain threads the eaves like a silver stitch. The whole ridge of the mountain village seems stitched to the sky. The light from the little tea-house glows like a steady heartbeat against the dark, oil gold and patient, so that when you first see it from the wet lane, it feels like arriving at a small, deliberate warmth. Inside, the keeper moves with the kind of care that makes small things last. She sets the lamp on its low wooden stand, checks the wick with a thumb, and draws the kettle nearer by the handle with a soft, deliberate tug. The kettle is an old thing, its belly well scored by heat and use, and the sound it makes when water begins to tremble is a small, familiar song. She lifts a wooden scoop, measures the tea with the same rhythm every night. 1 scoop, 2, the way hands remember measures the way the heart remembers names, and lets the leaves fall into the bowl. The leaves breathe steam on contact and curl slowly like small, dark flags. There is an hourglass on the counter, a little glass body cradled in a band of wood, sand that sighs when turned. She sets it down beside the kettle, turns it over with the same calm gesture she uses to lay cloth on a table, and for a moment the house keeps its own private counting. The keeper's fingers are gentle with simple instruments, the scoop, the bowl, the lamp's wick. Each touch is a small ceremony of tending. No more than tending, no less. It is not a temple. It is hospitality made steady. Outside, rain collects in the stone gutters and runs with a sound like thin percussion. The lane, made of old cobbles, glistens between low fences and mossy stones. A few yellowing leaves cling to the edges of roofs. Water makes them shine like polished coins. From deeper in the village, the faint shuffle of other doors suggests lives that overlap here. A seamstress pinning a cloth at her window, a gardener returning with muddy palms, a bookbinder counting out his day's repairs on a ragged workbench. The tea-house is a hinge. People pass through or pause, and when the night is like this, they come inside for a moment of careful warmth. If this gentle night suits you, a like or quiet follow helps bring more evenings like this. When the door opens, it is with no clatter and no haste. The first to come tonight is an elder who favors a slow, upright gait and keeps his hat pressed between his hands. He has the sort of face that reads like a map of small things remembered. A patch of a childhood lane, a winter lantern, a bowl once cherished. He does not announce himself with words so much as with the soft sound of his steps and the scent of rain that clings to his coat. He sets down a small parcel wrapped in plain paper. Inside, a thin strip of oilcloth he thought the keeper might use, and says simply, "Saw this out on the path. Thought you might like it." Not long after, the gardener arrives, boots dark with the mountain earth and a bundle of bulbs tucked into a cloth. She loosens her scarf and smiles because her hands are full of damp soil and small green promises. She talks quietly about the bulbs, where she found them, where they might be planted by the tea-house window in spring, offering a thought more than a plan. Her voice is practical and soft. She rubs the back of one hand with the other, as if smoothing soil from under her nails. A seamstress appears with a box of spare thread and a coil of strong twine. The seamstress's hands are steady, inked slightly by the pins she keeps between her teeth. She says nothing dramatic. She simply says what is needed. If the awning gives way, I can stitch the hems. She has a way of showing confidence in small materials, as though visible repair simply proved the future could be liked, mended, and made visible again. The bookbinder brings strips of oak and a small leather pad, his fingers smelling faintly of glue. He places his parcel on the counter, an oak slat, sanded smooth, useful for pressing thin panes into place, and taps the edge with 2 knuckles as if testing its readiness. 2 children follow in his wake, apprentices in small joys, a boy with sticky fingers who likes to try his hand at knotting, and a girl who watches the lamp as if memorizing its light. They fold and unfold their hands, keeping close to the warmth. The keeper greets each of them without hurry. She pours the elder a cup of tea that fogs the room with gentle steam. She lifts the lid of a small box and offers a biscuit to the gardener. The seamstress accepts without a word and tucks the twine into a pocket. Each arrival is a small offering, goods, time, a scrap of thought, and each is received with the equal weight of gratitude. There is a quiet ritual to the way they share the space. Teapots clink in a soft rhythm. The hourglass makes a gentle, granular rattle as it sits waiting. They set their parcels down on the long, low counter as if laying out the pieces of a jigsaw already partly known. Conversation flows in fragments, a remembered repair, a joke about the weather, a recipe for a bread that never rises more than a little but is always warm. No one speaks loud. Voices in a place like this soften by habit, as if raised sound would disturb the arrangements of small, necessary things. On the counter, next to a small pile of tea leaves, sits an old tea bowl, a simple, rounded thing, the glaze worn to a soft sheen where hands have warmed it. The keeper warms the bowl with a cloth and pours the boiling water in a slow, measured stream. Steam rises in a faint column, and the whole room inhales the scent. The vegetal, faintly sweet suggestion of the leaves, and the damp mountain air mingling in the same breath. It is a scent that seems to fold time inward, like turning a page slowly. They settle around a low table. The elder tells a short memory about a storm long ago when the river rose and the whole village learned to move carefully. He does not make the story grand. He simply mentions the way the rope they had was surprisingly useful, or how a plank thought lost turned up in a neighbor's shed. The gardener remembers a spring when a single misplaced bulb rooted and made a surprise corner of brightness. The seamstress shows a small patch she once made on a coat for a child who would not keep still. The bookbinder hums the rhythm of his trade, the strike, the fold, the line that holds paper to spine. When the keeper listens, she tilts her head and uses one short phrase now and again, a question that asks more for detail than for confirmation. This is a household of small responses. They keep their stories minimal but whole, the sort of words that smooth into silence afterwards, like a mat laid carefully at the door. Later, as they speak, the keeper glances toward the window. The rain, which had been steady, now draws a particular attention to the eaves outside. A thin edge of the canvas awning, the one that juts over the lane like a low roof, has loosened where the stitching has held out for many mornings. A flap has begun to sag. At first it is only a small tear, a notch at the edge. The rain finds it and presses through in a thread of darker water, making a line that runs down the awning's underside. She watches it with a small, immediate worry. Not because the tear is dramatic, there is no panic at all, but because the awning's light is what keeps the doorway dry for those who come late, and because it is in the small things that this village holds its order. A tear, left unattended, can invite more damp and then more trouble. A quicker fix would do, but the keeper feels something else nudge at the edges of her thought. What if they made the mending a small thing of beauty instead of merely a patch? What if the repair itself could become another kind of warmth? She mentions it quietly. A tear, by the corner. The seamstress steps forward, glances up at the roof where the fabric hangs, and nods. The seamstress's hands are already thinking in stitches. The bookbinder taps his fingers against the oak slat and suggests reinforcement with a new strip of wood at the awning's edge. The gardener offers beeswax and oilcloth. The elder smiles and produces a length of cord he had been saving. The children look at one another, their eyes bright with the possibility of doing something useful. Outside, the rain tightens its sound. It is not a storm that demands shelter so much as a rain that insists on being noticed. The tear begins to seem like a question that the village can answer. They gather tools from the corners of their packs: a small mallet, a few nails, a leather punch, a roll of thin paper, a pot of paste the seamstress keeps for delicate hems. There is no hurry, only a steady movement toward mending. They decide, almost without speech, on a course that feels, to everyone present, pleasing. Instead of a blunt, utilitarian patch, they will stitch along the tear and then add small panes of thin paper beneath the awning, so the lamp within will spill through in warm bands. It will give the lantern light somewhere to travel. The idea carries with it the sort of gentle pleasure that comes from making something useful into something seen. "Let it hold the light," the keeper says. Her voice is quiet, but there is a small wonder in it, like someone inventing a new way to set a teacup down. The apprentices cheer in a way that is quiet but immediate. They pair off with tasks. The boy is given the twine to measure lengths. The girl is taught how to fold the thin paper so the edges stay sure. The seamstress lays out a small square of paste and shows how to apply it sparingly, just enough to hold the corners without making the paper stiff. The bookbinder prepares the oak slat to be fixed along the awning's inner lip. The gardener prepares the beeswax, rubbing it on cloth to warm it with his hands so it becomes pliable and quick to work. There is a slow choreography to the preparation. Tools are placed in a line on the counter like quiet soldiers of a benign, useful war. The mallet's head catches lamplight and seems for a beat to warm. The leather punch sits like a black pebble by the seamstress's fingers. The thin paper, soft, slightly fibrous, pale as winter light, is rolled with tenderness and spread flat on the table. The paste, a gloss of starchy white, sits in a little potsherd bowl, its surface reflecting the lamp like a tiny pond. One by one they shape their tasks into small, repeatable movements. The seamstress teaches the keeper how to size the paper panes, cut, fold, secure with a strip of twine threaded through small holes. The bookbinder drills with a patient hand the new grommets that will loop the twine and take the strain of wind. The gardener seals the edges with beeswax, rubbing the warmed wax until the paper seems to gain a soft resilience. When the children are taught to fold, they listen with the wide attention of learners. Their fingers, ungainly at first, become steady. There is a tenderness in the teaching, an unspoken rule that hands are to be guided, not scolded. As they work, stories slip in between the strokes. The elder recounts a time his father taught him to tie a knot that would not slip even when the line was wet. He demonstrates with the cord until it ends in a neat loop, and the seamstress nods in approval. The bookbinder mentions a foolish patch he once made that peeled away in a single gust, earning the village's quiet laughter. The gardener speaks of a time he sealed a window with wax and woke to find his cat had unknotted the whole thing by morning. No one scolds the cat. Such small disturbances are simply part of making and keeping. The keeper answers with tiny remembrances: how she learned to replace a lamp's wick without spill, How the hourglass taught her patience and the precise measures of tea. The movements become a kind of music. Scissors snip in a clean rhythm. The mallet taps at each grommet in a steady, calm beat. The brush spreads a paste in slow arcs that leave a glistening path. Fingers crease the paper so that the edges lie flat. Their breaths are quiet and in time with the work. The lamp adds a steady, low hiss to this. It is the sort of sound that makes what is happening feel both ordinary and attentive, as if the smallest acts are being held like a hymn. They prepare the panes in rows. Each pane is a little window, a rectangle of thin paper stretched taut across a light frame. When one is finished, the seamstress lifts it up and holds it to the lamp. The paper takes the light in and whooshes it outward in a soft, steady wash, as if it has always been waiting for that moment. The apprentices look at the effect and their faces soften. The keeper, who has watched many small miracles of warmth, considers how even a thin paper can rework how light travels. There is a practical sequence to what follows. The oak slat will be affixed along the awning's inner edge. Grommets are to be set at measured intervals. Twine will be threaded to carry the panes. Beeswax will seal the joins against the rain's entrance. They lay out the panes on the floor in the order they will hang, like a small parade of promises. The seamstress marks where each grommet should sit. The bookbinder outlines with a pencil the places where the oak slat will be bored for nails. The gardener tests a small knot, showing the children how to curve the loop so it slides easily but does not slip. As the rain continues, the tea grows cooler in the bowls, sending up thinner clouds of scent. Hands keep working. The elder tells how, one winter, he and a friend saved a broken lantern by sliding in a scrap of colored paper. And suddenly it was not a broken thing but an altered, luminous object. His small anecdote nudges a shared philosophy, that repair need not disguise, it may reveal. They have already decided this evening to let the mending be visible, to let the lamp find new character in its diffusion. At one point, the seamstress reaches for a fine blade and, with a careful hand, trims the edge of a pane. The cut is precise, leaving paper that glows evenly under the lamp. The sound of the blade sliding through paper is a thin, satisfying whisper. The child who watches presses fingers to the table, as if learning the tremor of controlled motion. The keeper pauses and lifts the hourglass, letting the sand spill. They watch the grains fall, and without speaking feel the night lengthen into a measure of attention. A rhythm sets in. Cut, fold, paste, hole, thread, seal. It is a loop that repeats itself until the hands, moved by habit, take on the calm of the looped stitch. The lamp's light pours through a finished pane and spreads to the floor in a warm rectangle. The wood takes on a honeyed tone, and the drops of rain outside seem to pirouette in that glow. In those quiet beams, the village's ordinary objects, teaspoon, sponge, thimble, glow in a way that makes them look like treasures refound. The keeper notices, too, how each person's method is slightly different. The seamstress makes her fold in one confident motion. The bookbinder measures twice before he bores. The gardener prefers the wax warm and spread slowly, while the elder knots as if he is tying the story to the rope. These differences do not jar. They assemble like the varied tones of a small choir. Each contribution has its weight and its place. Outside, the rain pulls a little harder, as if curious about the small industry under the eaves. The windows in the tea-house fog with breath and steam. Finger marks trail where a hand brushed in, passing. For a moment, the lamp seems to glow larger, as if enjoying being made new. The panes in a row, when held to the light, look like a sash of pale windows. Soft, not transparent, a kind of deliberate privacy that still allows a stripe of warmth to escape. The children are given a simple task to make the time pass into useful motion. They tie short lengths of twine into neat loops for the panes, learning the careful practice of knot and tuck. Their small mouths make puckered expressions of concentration. Sometimes they succeed and beam. Sometimes their knot slips, and a generous hand shows them again, patient as the lamp. The keeper shows them where the panes will sit, then asks them to line them up in order of size so the hanging will look like the rhythm of a measured breath. As evening deepens, the seamstress steps outside to take the measure of the awning once the night allows her a closer look. She leans into the rain not as an inconvenience, but as a material, running a gloved finger along the torn edge. The tier is not large, but it has been widened by a few months of weather. She presses her mouth into a thin line and considers the best way to keep it from opening further. She suggests a double-stitched hem reinforced with the oak slat. The bookbinder nods, and they agree on the spacing of grommets to take the strain. Before they move outside to work that will drape the lane in paper light, the keeper sets fresh tea into small cups and passes them around, and there is a short pause while everyone drinks. The tea, now quieter, seems to be another kind of repair. It steadies the hands, softens the mood, reminds the body that the night is not only about work, but about being together under a roof that is being kept. They step outdoors with tools tucked into aprons and pockets. The night air is cooler, the rain sharp on the face in thin, fine needles. The lamp at the tea-house door casts a circle of dry light beneath the eaves where they stand, and the wet lane reflects that light back as a darker mirror. The awning droops, and the tier looks somehow more immediate here. Every drop that finds the notch makes a quick, dark mark that slithers like a small animal down the fabric. The bookbinder takes the oak slat and positions it against the awning's soffit, holding it so the seamstress can mark where the grommets will sit. The seamstress pierces small holes through the folded fabric where the grommets will be set. Each small puncture makes a neat, audible nip. The mallet lifts and falls with a soft little thud as the bookbinder sets the first grommet in place. The sound is neither loud nor boastful. It is the precise music of a tool doing its work. The gardener warms a small pot of beeswax by the lamp, turning the block in his hands until it yields like soft candle fat. He then rubs it along the cut edges and along the twine. The wax closes the fibers and slows the rain's appetite. When he presses his finger to the waxed edge, it leaves a print that quickly smooths into the paper's skin. The child, watching, presses his own fingertip and feels the faint stick, and then the calm of the smear. A small gust threatens to test their patience. The awning quivers. The seamstress holds the oak slat more firmly, while the boy hands up the next grommet. For a moment the night's breath seems to pose a question, but the hands steady, and the second grommet is set with a gentle but decisive strike. The keeper's lamp is close enough now that the light plays beneath the new slotted edge, and slips through the stitches to paint a thin band under the eaves. They work in the rain, but under a cover of light and intent. There is no heroism, only a series of careful, honest decisions that together change what the awning is. The thin paper panes are threaded, wound, sealed, and lined in a row like a necklace. The oak slat becomes a spine. Each pane is tested against the lamp and adjusted until the light that leaks through is even and warm. Then, just as they prepare to hoist the panes into place, the keeper pauses and looks up the lane, listening. The rain makes its own decision and eases into a hush, as if time itself wants to hear what will happen next. The villagers stand with their work in hands, the panes ready, the twine looped, the grommets set. For an instant the air holds something like a collective breath, anticipation that is neither hurried nor anxious, but expectant in the way people are when they are about to reveal something small and tender to the dark. The keeper's hands hover over the first pane. The seamstress, the bookbinder, the gardener, the elder, the children, they all watch their own roles align like parts of a quiet machine. The first pane catches the lamp and seems bright enough to shift the rain's reflection on the cobbles below. It is almost time to fix them into the awning, to let the light ripple through the paper and out into the lane so that passers-by might see the new warmth and slow their steps. But before they raise the first string, the keeper sets another small cup of tea by the door and calls the children in to fold away their wet gloves. She ties a small length of twine loosely around her own wrist like a reminder. The hourglass on the counter, which had been left to its own counting, now shows only a thin stream of sand left in the upper bulb. For a moment she turns it, and watches the grains slip again, as though making time pliable and ready. They stand on the border between the work completed and the act of revealing. The panes lie in a neat row. The oak slat is bored and ready. The twine is looped. The rain has settled into a softer hymn, and the whole lane seems to listen. There is a sense, gentle and sharp at once, that what they are about to do will change the face of the night for a little while, that the lamp will no longer simply give light but will be refracted into many softer voices. As they prepare the first line, the elder leans closer and murmurs a thought, the sort of small superstition that belongs to people who have lived through many winters, that lamps remember those who keep them lit. The gardener, smiling, counters that it is the hands that remember, not the lamp. The keeper considers both remarks and, with a small smile, says nothing more than, "Then we will make a memory together," and lifts the first pane. The pane is steady in her hands, paper warmed slightly by the lamp, and the moisture she has smoothed from its edge. She brings it to the awning and threads the loop over the first grommet. The seamstress guides the pane to sit evenly. The bookbinder steadies the oak slat. For a few breaths, the whole village is held in a small, concentrated action. Thread, loop, slide, settle. The pane hangs, and the lamp floods through it in a soft, even sheen. They step back for a collective appraisal. The light looks different now, diffused, gentle, like a string of small, warm breaths. Shadows on the cobbles have lost their sharpness. There is a ribbon of amber that runs along the lane where the rain still sings. A passer-by across the way slows, drawn by the change, and for a moment the quiet of the village is shared with this small, growing illumination. The keeper feels the tilt of satisfaction that comes from a job well begun, but there is still much to do. The panes must be spaced, the knots double-checked, the beeswax readjusted at the joins. Nails must be tapped home where the oak meets other beams. The children must be taught how to dry their fingers without bending the paper. And somewhere in that list is a soft desire to make each pane slightly different, to let the light tell more stories than one. They prepare for the next pane. Their hands find the rhythm again. The seamstress's blade slices a sliver, the bookbinder punches the hole, and the gardener seals the edge. Outside, a stray cat winds along the fence, briefly lit by the new glow, and then gone. The keeper, who has so often tended lamp and tea and small human business, breathes in and feels a private contentment settle in her chest. There is still work to be done, yet the house already feels altered by the intention behind the repair. Then, almost without anyone realizing, a distant sound rises, a footfall, hesitant and slow, coming up the lane. It is not the regular stride of a known villager. It is lighter, younger, and carries with it a small uncertainty. For a moment the group looks toward the sound. The apprentice boy straightens as if to go. The seamstress lifts an eyebrow, and the keeper's hands pause over the next pane. Outside, beneath the watchful eaves, the rain seems to pause, waiting to see how they will answer the step that approaches. The lamp's glow spills through the single pane already in place and paints a door where none had been. The moment is slight as a breath, and the work, which until now has been a steady sequence of tasks, holds at the edge of another possible small-story beginning. The village's soft chorus is ready to continue, but the next line of panes waits in the keeper's hands, their paper surfaces pale under the lamplight, wanting to be fixed into place. The footfall was small and uncertain, and for a moment the knight leaned in to listen. The keeper's hands still hovered over the next pane, and the seamstress looked toward the lane with the same mild curiosity she managed for most unexpected comings. The boy, who had been winding twine into neat loops, straightened as if to go meet whoever had come. The girl watched the doorway as if she were watching a page turn. A young traveler stood in the wet circle of the lane, water darkening the hem of his coat. He held something wrapped in cloth close to his chest. A little lantern, its glass smudged, its handle dented from a journey. Perhaps he had simply seen the glow and the promise of dry warmth and thought to follow it. He bowed in the doorway, as one does in a place where courtesy is practiced and not proclaimed, and the keeper stepped forward to offer a cup without asking a question first. It was the sort of small insistence, tea given before stories, that taught strangers how to become guests. He unwrapped the lantern with careful fingers. Inside lay not a great treasure, but a small shard of painted pottery the traveler said he had found by the river. Something that had been lovely once and now wanted a new place. He spoke of markets and a misty bridge, and how he had thought, for reasons he could not name, that perhaps here it would find a resting place. The seamstress accepted the shard, as if the village did not distinguish much between gifts of use and gifts of memory. The elder made a small noise that could be a laugh or an intake of approval. The bookbinder suggested a little box be made to hold it, and the gardener offered to press a sprig of pine into the wrapping. The keeper poured tea for the traveler and for everyone at the doorway, and the steam rose between them like the beginning of a shared understanding. The traveler spoke in short, careful sentences about the sound of oars on a late river, and a place where rain had come like small beads, one after another, as if it were counting time. He did not stay long. Words in a house like this are often enough when they are brief. He thanked them by lowering his head, and gave nothing more than a quiet grin that suggested he had, for a moment, found what he'd been looking for. Their attention returned again to the panes, and the seamstress's blade bit cleanly when she trimmed the edge of the next sheet. The keeper lifted it. The lamp kissed its surface, and a warm strip of light slid across the cobbles like molten honey. They threaded the twine through the next grommet, looped, and settled. The pane swung into place, and the lane brightened a little more. One by one they hung the panes until the awning wore them like a garland. Each pane had its own slight nuance. One took the light with a blush of warm yellow, another allowed a more neutral, pearly glow. But together they sang the same low song of welcome. A passer-by, the sort of late traveler who walks the lane more out of habit than intention, paused and slowed his pace. He stood under the shadow of a nearby fence and watched as the lamplight filtered through a succession of thin papers and spilled across the stones. He did not come in. He did not need to. He simply tilted his head and, without a word, placed his palm against his chest as if to steady something within himself that had shifted. The seamstress and the bookbinder, who had been used to a quieter street, exchanged a glance that held a kind of gentle pride. In the hush that followed, the keeper thought of how small changes can rearrange the way a night feels. They finished the last pane as the rain, which had been patient all evening, relented into a milder drizzle. The final knots were doubled. Wax was pressed along vulnerable seams, and the oak slat was tapped one last time so that every nail sat flush with its skin. The bookbinder wiped his palms on his apron, leaving a faint smudge the color of grease and wood, and the gardener rubbed the warmth of the beeswax between his fingers and then into the cloth. The children had run their fingers along the edges of the hung panes, marveling at the way light now passed through the awning in measured stripes. The lane below cast into satin bands of amber and dove gray. They stood back, as people do when a long moment of work comes to a close, and allowed themselves the small indulgence of appraisal. The lamp now felt like a constellation. Where before there had been a single, honest glow, the light now had the quality of a chorus, notes overlapping, softening one another. Shadows reverted to gentleness. The awning, once torn and thin, now wore its repair like a recipe for hospitality. Visible, deliberate, beautiful in its practicality. For a little while no one spoke. The teacups, emptied earlier, steamed faintly near the counter, and the hourglass offered the soft susurration of sand being patient. The elder, who had been watching the seamstress's hands all evening, cleared his throat and made the sort of remark that is both a compliment and a small historical note. "It looks like the lane has put on a good coat." That remark set a small ripple of amusement through the group. The seamstress gave a modest bow. The children preened in a way that made them seem years older in a single breath. They did not make a feast, but they shared bread warmed from the oven, a small hearty loaf that broke apart in imperfect pieces, and a jar of preserved citrus the gardener had brought earlier in the week. The keeper poured tea again, and the quiet conversation that followed was the sort that knits days together without fuss. Plans about where to plant the new bulbs, a debate about whether the elder's knot might yet be improved, a shared memory about a winter when a single bright lamp had directed a lost heron down the lane. The traveler left with his lantern tucked under his arm. He paused at the threshold and, looking back, bowed his head as if the light had somehow lodged inside him. The keeper closed the door softly behind him, and, with a small, habitual gesture, checked the wick of the lamp, confirming the way it sat and the light it would give for the rest of the night. The hourglass was turned again. The grains began their patient fall as if to measure a new portion of time, and the keeper set it on the counter where its glass caught the lamp and fragmented the light into a slender, shining ribbon. There is a tenderness to finishing a communal task. It arrives like the soft settling of stacked things. Cloth folded, tools cleaned, hands wiped. They washed the brushes, coiled the twine, and laid the mallet in its place. The seamstress folded her packet of spare thread into the smallest neat square and slipped it into her bag. The bookbinder placed the oak slat upon a peg where it could dry and be used again. The gardener rolled up his beeswax-clad cloth and tucked it away where it would be warm to the touch the next time it was needed. The children were sent to dry their palms by the lamp. They watched the familiar process of soot and steam become a lesson in patience. The keeper gave the boy a small nod, and the girl a quiet thanks for the thoroughness of their loops. There was no performative boasting. Gratitude here was made of small, specific things. The elder, who had been quiet for some time, produced a packet of simple, round biscuits from his coat. Biscuits he had baked earlier in the week for a neighbor. They were dry in a particular, satisfying way, and suited tea perfectly. He handed them out with 2 words, spoken as if they were a gentle spell. For keeping. The tea-house keeper moved through these final tasks like a conductor guiding a soft ensemble. She tidied the counter, sweeping crumbs into a small tin, rearranging the stacked tea canisters until they sat balanced in an attentive line. She wiped the kettle's lip, set a small cloth over the lid to cool, and lifted a lid to check the bowl they used for evening cleansing. A basin of warm water that carried the last clinging steam of the afternoon. Each motion was precise and unhurried. The whole house responded as if these were the notes one plays at the end of a long song. When everything seemed ready, she set out a small jar on the doorstep, a little provision for any late wanderer who might come when the house itself slept. Inside were a few biscuits wrapped in waxed cloth and a folded note that simply read, "Light and welcome." It was a practical kindness. It might be taken or it might sit until dawn, but placing it there felt like a promise that the village kept itself in ways both grand and tiny. The keeper glanced once more at the hourglass, then lifted it and allowed the last grains in the upper bulb to fall. She placed it gently into its cradle on the counter. Its sound was a domestic punctuation, a soft punctuation mark at the end of the night's work. The lamp's flame, which had spent the evening competing with the attention of many hands, now seemed to settle into a steady glow, content with the new panes that gave it companions and softened its solitary reach. When at last the keeper decided that the public work of the evening was done, she moved toward the narrow staircase that led to the small sleeping room above the tea-house. The seamstress wrapped her parcel of twine. The bookbinder took his leave with an invitation to bring the oak slat back in the morning for any final adjustments. The gardener gathered his basket and promised to return with a pot for the window ledge come spring. The children were sent home with a soft chiding, and, in lieu of a scolding, the elder gave them each a biscuit. In a quiet house like this, parting is a gentle, rehearsed thing. Up the narrow stairs the keeper climbed slowly, her hand gliding along the banister that had been worn to a soft shine by years of use. The stairs smelled faintly of old wood and tea steam, a scent that had a way of making the brain fold in on itself and remember things in a kind, tidy way. At the top, she paused in the landing and looked out of the small window. The lane below was a band of muted light now. The panes cast their soft stripes, and a figure moved under them, a silhouette that became anonymous and then known by the way it carried its shoulders. Her room was modest, a futon laid on matting, a small chest that held extra cloths, and a single folded blanket. She set down her lantern, and, with the practiced economy of someone who has slept many nights beneath the same roof, she opened the cupboard and arranged a small stack of linens within arm's reach. The attic was simple and calm. It had the mild clutter of a life that does not overconsume. A spool of extra twine, an old pair of scissors, a neatly folded apron. Before she extinguished the lamp, she crossed the small room and opened the window slightly to listen. The rain had softened to a steady thread, a sound that suggested continuity rather than interruption. Outside, the mountains cut the sky into a dark, ordered silhouette. Under the awning, the newly hung panes breathed their light in gentle pulses as the lamp inside warmed and cooled with the air. She sat on the edge of the futon, took a cup of cooler tea with both hands, and drank in small sips, the kind that do not rush but remind. Each sip was like a small return to balance. It steadied the limbs and smoothed the way the evening sat across her shoulders. She set the cup upon the bedside table and turned the hourglass once more, making a private ritual of that minute measure. Watching the sand fall, she allowed her shoulders to unknit from the day's tenses. Her hands, which had been so intent on work, rested on her knees and felt the slow pulse of quiet. The night was not a thing to conquer, it was a container to step into. She dressed for sleep with movements practiced and soft, folding the cloak, loosening the ties at her waist, laying the lamp slightly aside. She smoothed the futon with a practiced hand and slid in beneath the blanket, letting her body sink a little into the bed. The scent of warm wood and faint tea filled the room like a last, easy note. If you like, make yourself comfortable now in whatever way feels right for you. Allow your body to find its place, whether lying down under a blanket or resting in a favorite chair. If you wear shoes, take them off. If your shoulders are holding the day's small weights, allow them to ease. You might soften your jaw. You may let your hands rest open in your lap or by your sides. There is no hurry to get anywhere. The lamp below continues its patient work of making shade and warmth. If it pleases you, bring your attention to the rhythm of your breath. Notice it without changing it. Feel the rise and fall like a tiny tide. Imagine, if you find the thought helpful, that each in-breath brings in something simple and useful, a warmth, a permission to rest, and each out-breath releases something no longer needed. You might picture the hourglass on the counter, its sand falling grain by grain, and let your breathing follow the same unforced tempo. There is no counting required. Simply notice the slow presence of the breath. Picture the tea house now from a small, close vantage. The lamp's flame, steady and unassuming, sending its glow through the paper panes, painting the lane in amber stripes. Hear the rain as it offers itself to the world, not as an alarm, but as a steady percussion on the roof, the kind that tucks small noises into a larger pattern and makes them feel safe. Imagine the soft scent of tea steam rising in the room below, gentle and green. Imagine the faint, honeyed tang of beeswax on a cloth that still remembers the gardener's hands. Allow a sense of weight to travel down through you, from the crown of your head to your feet. Picture that weight as a gentle warmth, like the heat of the lamp when a hand holds it nearby. It moves slowly down the neck, releasing any tightness, sliding across the shoulders and easing the joints of the arms. It gathers in your hands and lets them unclench. It continues through the chest. Your ribs open like small doors, each breath making room and then closing with soft satisfaction. There is nothing you must do here except be with these small sensations. If thoughts arise, as they will, for they are part of being awake, imagine them as leaves floating on the surface of a slow stream. Watch them pass without following them. When you notice you have reached for one, simply let it drift by and return to the steadier images. The lamp's glow, the sound of the rain, the hourglass's patient fall. The keeper in the tea house has learned long ago that the night will hold many small things. It can hold them whether they are heavy or light. Let the night hold your thoughts for a while. Bring attention now to the place where your body meets the surface beneath you. Sense the points of contact. Perhaps the heels, the lower back, the shoulders against the mattress. You might imagine the futon beneath you as the same sort of soft welcome you felt in the tea house, a padded counter that receives what you lay upon it without judgment. Notice any small tension there and invite it, if you like, to soften. Imagine the warmth of the lamp being a soft radiance beneath your skin, a low amber that filters through and calms the muscles it touches. Picture the small, ordinary objects that made the evening possible. The scoop that measures the tea, the wooden mallet that tapped the grommets into place, the little bowl that held the paste for the panes. Visualize them arranged in a neat line on the counter, each having done its modest work and now resting. Let the feeling of that order come into you, the restful order of things set in place. Imagine the moonlight or the lamplight passing through the panes and drawing thin, graceful bands across a sleeping body, like a soft hand smoothing a blanket. If it helps, you might imagine the seamstress showing the children how to fold paper so its edges will hold. See the slow, attentive motion of the fingers as they crease and press, and feel a similar quiet attention now upon your own breathing, your own soft body. You do not need to hurry to fold anything. This is a time for slow making and gentling. There may be a small warmth in your chest where gratitude often lives. For small mercies, a good cup of tea, an answered question, a hand offered, and you might give that warmth some space. If the gratitude is not there, that is also perfectly acceptable. Not every night does it visit. Allow whatever is present and stable like the lamplight itself. Imagine that above the tea house, under the eaves, the keeper slides a soft blanket over her shoulders and looks once more at the street, now softened by the new panes. She breathes in the rhythm of the house and then lets exhale carry any remaining edge of tension down the stairs, out into the lane, into the rain. If you find your own breath quickening at any point, invite it to slow, not by force but by gentle attention, like noticing the way steam curls from a cup. Let your limbs grow heavier in that good, yielding way that signals readiness for sleep. Your arms may feel pleasantly weighted. Your legs, released from the day's duties, might sink. If small sensations, an itch, a memory, a plan, arrive, let them be the quiet companions they are. They can stand at the periphery while the center of your awareness rests on the peaceful images, lamp, paper, rain, warmth. As your body relaxes, your mind may follow like a tide finding its own shape. Scenes may appear and vanish. A child tying a neat knot, the seamstress trimming an edge, the gardener rubbing beeswax into a seam. Each a small vignette that needs no rehearsal. You might let these images move through you without clinging, allowing one to pass and another to take its place. Each is like a lamp painting, each a soft occurrence that does not require action. If you enjoy imagining textures, call to mind the sensation of paper between fingers. Delicate, fibrous, with the faint resistance that yields to a careful fold. Picture the oak slat, warm from being held, its grain like a quiet map beneath a palm. Think of the beeswax, pliant and faintly fragrant, leaving a trace on the fingertips that lingers like a small memory. These textures are simple and immediate. They invite a calm that is tactile as well as mental. There is no need to chase a specific feeling of sleep. Sleep is not a goal to be striven for. It is a guest that arrives when we reduce the clatter of necessity and make space for small, kind things. You have prepared that space here. You have the soft images, the steady breath, the suggestion of warm light. Allow the rest to come as it will. If you notice your breathing settle into longer, softer waves, allow that to be enough. If you feel your eyelids grow heavier, let them close without ceremony. If your mind drifts into a thought that asks for attention, you may note it and let it pass, returning to the comforting images of the lamp and the rain. Each return is gentle practice. There is no right way to be here, only the simple fact of being present. Below, in the tea house, the hourglass finishes its small measuring and is turned once more for the keeper's private minutes. The lamp burns without demand. The awning's paper panes continue to scatter light in kind bands across the lane, and the rain becomes a soft hymn that soothes rather than urges. The jar of biscuits on the doorstep remains as it was, a polite, quiet offering. The village settles into its own pattern, inhabitants moving toward their own small rooms and their own quiet rituals. If you would like, let these final images be the last thing you hold. The lamp's gentle heart, the paper that makes light soft, the sound of rain as a steady, distant drum. Picture them merge into a single, gentle scene where warmth rests across the shoulders and the night keeps careful watch. You might feel the curtain of sleep descend like a comfortable blanket, not abrupt, but negotiated in the slow way that matches our breathing. There's nothing more to do now than to allow the acceptance of rest. Trust the house's light to hold what must remain and the night to keep its count. If a word of closing seems fitting, you might say inwardly, simply and soft, that you are ready to rest. Then let that thought ease into the broader quiet. If you would like more evenings such as this, to return to the quiet of the lamp and the small rhythm of mending and tea, subscribe to the channel and let the quiet return. For now, let the lamp keep its light and sleep. When it comes, be gentle and unhurried. Good night.